Welcome back, everybody. I'm so excited for today's subject, but I gotta warn you, today's subject is slightly esoteric in the sense where you're really going to have to stick with me through this process so that I could break you out of your original programming, update your programming with the new programming so that down the road you could kind of support what we have going on here, and that way you, the generations ahead of you, are going to benefit tremendously from today's lesson. Okay, today's lesson is something I coined the paradoxical mathematics, and I'm going to close the loop that the universe has left open for you. Okay, and the more you practice all of that which I had, given lessons of the past regarding the yin and the yang, other symbols such as symbols like the Vesica Pisces, the yin and the yang. I've got plenty of those right here. Let me show to you the hemp co-op, yin and the yang. Yeah, there's plenty of symbols that will aid in your understanding of the yin and the yang, but there are no other symbols that are required of you other than these two, really, or they're virtually the same. Okay, I'll open this up for you again. Photos. Here you go. This is the Vesica Pisces. All right. This is the yin and the yang. You've already seen it many times. Okay. So going over to the Vesica Pisces. The Vesica Pisces, let's open this on Wikipedia. It solely represents, at the very fundamental level, you have your yin or the yang on one side. That represents one sphere. The yin or the yang on the opposite side, or the second sphere, I shouldn't say opposite, but the second sphere. When they come together, they overlap. In this overlapping region, we call this the Vesica Pisces, which is the Vesica Pisces, which is the interaction of the two, you could say, contrasting element. The two contrasting elements, okay? So when they overlap, just like any time you come close to somebody else, your energy will overlap with that individual. When you both come together, you have your own sets of energy, your own set of, he's got his own or she's got her own, it's on the opposite end. And what you could create as a combination, the simultaneous overlapping of the two, the concurrent energy, is what we call the third component, the creation from you two, basically, the combination and the collaboration of the two to form what we know as the Vesica Pisces, which is an ancient symbol, also the symbol for the MasterCard. All right, I had already mentioned this before in previous lessons. It's extremely important for you to understand that, because that concept alone is going to help us bridge you to the next understanding and breaking you out of the next programming that you have been programmed by the universe. You could call that a conspiracy, you can call it whatever you want, but you'll discover sooner or later that all of the universe's secrets has been in front of you all of this time. And it's only a matter of time when you, in your own personal awareness, grows and expands so that you could fully understand that which has been sitting all in front of you within the emptiness around you all along. Okay? Today's subject it pertains to mathematics, and it's simple. I want to explain mathematics in a way that is understood by everybody, not just mathematicians or people, or quantum physicists, rocket scientists, accountants, or whatnot. I'm going to explain it to you in a way that I would explain it to my parents, to make it very easy. That would be difficult. I can't explain this to my parents, but they've never taken mathematics. But I'd like to explain it to you from, your everyday examples in layman's terms. So Here's my shot at that, okay? I wrote in Google, I typed in why you cannot divide a number by 0. Okay, you can see right here I clearly misspelled that. All right, and the answer to that I got by Google is, in ordinary arithmetic, the expression has no meaning. Meaning, when you were a kid, you were given ordinary arithmetic that was never given any meaning, as there is no number which, when multiplied by 0, gives a, assuming a equals to 0. Then again, they're assuming that a equals to 0, and so division by 0 is undefined. So this is telling me, now that I understand more about the yin and yang and the universe's language, is that you and us were not given the proper understanding, as to why a number cannot be divided by 0. Okay? But in reality, this is just a programming that we've been given, that any number divided by 0 is undefined. It's only a programming, a definition that we were given in the lower levels of mathematics. So I'm assuming that when you go higher up in the ranks and in the charts, you are given this answer. Have I been given the answers? No. Okay, so I'm assuming it's been given to people that are in a particular exclusive group, so to speak, or perhaps when you have gotten to the higher levels of mathematics, which I was not able to uncover. I'm not sure where it's hiding. No one's ever come up to me to say, hey, you can divide by 0, in this particular field. I have one person who said that you can divide it by 0 in linear mathematics or whatnot, but so far, nothing very convincing, okay? So it goes on to say that since any number multiplied by 0 is 0, the expression 0, 0 is also undefined. When it is the form of a limit, it is an indeterminate form. So you can read off of Google alone that it's not going to be fun trying to figure this out, because most of us don't even understand, this concept as a whole. The expression has no meaning, as there is no number which, when multiplied by 0, gives a, and so division by 0 is undefined, assuming a equals to 0. So they're assuming a equals to 0, and also given that you had no definition or a meaning to describe a number when multiplied by 0. You weren't given the full picture, so to speak. So using words like that, it's very confusing to the average person. Since any number multiplied by 0 is 0, the expression 0, 0 is also undefined. So they are giving you many definitions. They call it mathematical logic. It's much the same way as if I were to come in and join the KKK and they say, you must hate black people, and that's the KKK's logic. Does it mean it's a global logic? Not necessarily. It just means that it's a logic defined by a certain group of people, or a culture, way of life of a certain type of individual, subsets of people, a group of people, so on and so forth, okay? But I'm just telling you that my goal is to break this programming, that which 99% of the world has been given, and to expand your programming to one in which that is closer to the universal understanding of all that exists. And as I explained to you, I only expect 1 in 1,000 to understand this, and I expect the other mental transformation for those remaining that aren't the 1 out of the 1,000 to grow in awareness, to expand in mental awareness, to the extent where you will eventually understand how you can divide a number by 0. It's just that we are going to give it a meaning based on our understanding of the yin and the yang, which are universal understanding of the world. And when you understand the world from a universal perspective, you'll understand the universe from everyone's perspective. And that leads you to the understanding that the mathematics that we've been given as a kid growing up implied, even though it could already be given or programmed or provided to you in plain sight. It's just what is implied to us as human beings to the norm ubiquitously is that you cannot divide a number by zero. Okay. All right. So let's forget all of these fancy words such as assuming this is that. This expression has no meaning. Let's forget any of that stuff. And I'm going to break it down to you from the perspective of opposites. Something you already know. Right, left, up, down, cold, hot, life, death, movement, stagnation, flow, crystallization, male, female, control, letting go. Okay? And how all of those have a middle ground, which we call the neutral point, the impartial point, or just the I don't care. That's the guy in the middle that goes, hey, I'm friends with both hot and cold, up and down, so therefore leave me out of this whole mix. I'm just simply neutral. You guys go ahead and fight, right? So going back to this, I'm going to use Wikipedia as our foundation because everyone believes Wikipedia. That's just the norm. That's just our global programming, because the world, capitalistic society, which is the world that is a subset within the universe, loves to program us in a particular way because capitalism loves money. So the goal of capitalistic education is to teach you and program you to follow money and follow competition as the holy grail of its way of life. Its Bible represents money. Its Bible represents capitalism. You learn and you grow through competition, which is true when you define it and ground it to the logic of capitalism. Because inspiration does the exact same thing. Like, I could like what you're creating, I could be inspired by it, and I can create it to say, hey, I'd like to create something on top of what you've already built because I'm inspired by what you've created. We've had this talk before. So inspiration also drives an industry, not just competition, okay? So competition is just something that we were programmed to believe that is the most compelling way to grow a society. And I can tell you, competition is just a phase of growth, whereas inspiration is also another phase that we go through. But when you're tired of, just being lovey-dovey, you phase into this person who just becomes more predominantly hateful versus loving. It's just a part of the natural cycle of a human being, much like the world around us has the sun coming in 12 hours, and when the sun disappears, it becomes dark. And even though you have the moon there just to kind of aid in that darkness, to relieve some of that darkness, it still globally is dark. And a lot of the times you could hide in the forest where the sun doesn't appear and you'll have complete and total darkness. Okay? So the idea here is that dark and cold, or dark and also sunlit, are opposites. They don't necessarily mean life and death in that sense, because you're still alive in the dark. You're very much alive. And in the sun, people can still die in the sun. Okay? So that's the yin within the yang and the yang within the yin. The same is very true with hate and love. There's hate within love and there's love within hate. You weren't taught that because of the programming, but you live and you learn, and most of your experiences will tell you that it's true, that there's love within hate and there's hate within love. They need to come to a level of awareness, or you do, to come to a level of awareness where you understand the necessity for them to live concurrently, for them to coexist, for you to embody them simultaneously and concurrently. And where you're feeling predominantly loving, we could say that's a dominant feeling of love. There's hate inside you that is buried deep within, that is necessary. You're not looking to bury that, despite what society tells you as part of the programming. of this capitalistic society, because society likes to pretend like its logic's the only logic that exists, mainly because we're in this phase of disintegration. We are in this 2,520 year phase of disintegration, where we are heading to our final period of the final 500 years, where eventually our society will come to an end. Okay, why 5620? I'll explain later. And it sounds pretty esoteric as the minute you mention a number, a limited number, because people start to freak out with that kind of stuff. Okay, I used to. So, but I'll explain why 5620, and it roots in the yin and the yang, not necessarily something that is esoteric where you cannot prove, so to speak. Okay. All right, going back to this, Wikipedia says right here that you could read through the whole thing. In elementary arithmetic, when division is explained at the elementary arithmetic level, it is often considered as splitting a set of objects into equal parts. As an example, consider having 10 cookies, and these cookies are to be distributed equally to 5 people at a table. Each person would receive 2 cookies. When you take 10, you divide that by 5, you get 2 cookies per individual. Similarly, if there are 10 cookies and only one person at the table, that person would receive 10 cookies. Okay? So, for dividing by 0, what is the number of cookies that each person receives when 10 cookies are evenly distributed among 0 people at a table? So in here there is a fallacy. It's, ironically, they talk about a lot of fallacies at the bottom. Fallacies are just words to tell you that this is a boundary that you must not cross within this given program that we are programming you with. Okay, so fallacy doesn't mean it's a universal fallacy. In this particular case, they're not saying this is a universal fallacy. They're giving you a logic that they're programming into you, and anything that breaks that logic is the fallacy. See, you understand what I'm saying? This is a fallacy within a fallacy, and this also applies to the yin and the yang. Right here. So you see the yin and the yang here in front of you. Pick any one of them. Okay, this big circle. The circle is telling you that there's truth and there's lies. The inner circle, the 2 inner circles, there's truth and lies within this life that you live in. And you go within this black frame right here on this black side. You just call this black lies. There's truth within this lies. And also on this white side, you can saw the white side being the truth. There are lies within that truth. Okay? So when you dig deep into it, we call this fractality. That the more you dig deep in, the more you'll find out that there's truth within that lie. And now you dig deep into that lie, there are truth within that particular lie. So the cycle is ongoing perpetually. And that's why we have the existence of the toroid. Okay? And when you zoom in on energy, you discover that energy is forever folding within itself while it is expanding from within. So it's collapsing onto itself, and it's expanding away from itself simultaneously. And that's why when you scan energy or x-ray something, you'll always have this toroidal effect, because fundamentally, foundationally, every energy is polarized, meaning that it pushes and it pulls simultaneously. It contradicts itself simultaneously all the time. You don't recognize that. You as a human being on the surface only catch yourself contradicting from time to time, simply because you are observing yourself on the surface. Okay? Those we deem to be crazy, namely because we associate contradiction as lunacy. Those who are walking contradiction tends to be very illogical because they break logic that we have been programmed to believe, to follow. And for those that are walking contradictions, they tend to break those logic, and therefore they tend to be this thing called a mad scientist. Mad from the perspective of those that are programmed to believe and live life a certain way, but not mad to those who understand metaphysics and physics concurrently, to understand that the universe is wrong and right simultaneously, that there are wrongs inside of rights and there are rights inside of wrongs, truth inside of lies and lies inside of truth. Okay? So if you could follow that logic, you could very much understand that logic is not limited. Logic is ever expansive, and it is only limited to what the universe has to offer. And when you could say that the universe is forever expanding, or is the totality of the universe, meaning that it umbrellas everything, that means that the limit of your logic, in terms of a universal logic, is infinite. But if you are basing your logic on the logic that's been programmed to you within this reality that we are living, a capitalistic reality, your logic is going to be extremely limited. And therefore, when you are talking and discussing with people who are metaphysicians, you're going to be completely lost, because it counters and it contradicts everything that you've been taught. And because where you are at, most of you who are high-level mathematicians, quantum physicists, or physicists who's been trained the classical way, this is going to break your paradigm, and it's going to send you into a world of hurt, put you in a world of hurt where everything is going to bother you, it's going to annoy you, it's going to frustrate you. Okay? But every now and then you have an extreme mathematician who comes from a classical background, who's been able to break out of that logical framework that has been programmed into you from capitalistic society, that society we live in today, this phase of the world that we live in today, this phase of this universe that you are, this journey, part of the journey that you are on. You simply will not get it. Okay? And it sounds very condescending from that perspective, but I could tell you this 100%, that the more you practice doing things opposite, that contradicts your own personal lifestyle as a kid growing up. That's why we're all so unique, because all of our experiences are so unique. But if you could go back to your past and you could tackle all of that which you've been trained classically, doing the right thing, using your right hand, from doing the wrong thing, within boundaries, within your own abilities, within your own framework, your own moral wall, so to speak. Or if you're right hand, try left-handed. If you're writing, from left to right, try writing from right to left. This level of contradiction, level of contrasting exercises will expand your opposite brain, so that you become right and left brain simultaneously. And when they merge together as one brain, you are going to understand the full breadth of what the universe is all about. And thus you'll be able to transcend the logic by which you have been given classically as a kid growing up. Okay? So that gives it to ya. All right, let's go on further with this. So I read through the whole Wikipedia definition as to why the division by zero is illogical, and you can go further down and to the basic algebra. You could clearly see that a lot of the logic that we've been given are just logic that has been given from a very limited capitalistic programming. Nothing against capitalism. I'm just, because 9 out of 10 of you, or 999 out of 1,000 of you, won't get this until later on down the road. Okay? Nothing against capitalism. But if you were to continue down this path and read through here, the fallacies that it's given you, Also, I could tell you right here, just to kind of use a simple extraction from this Wikipedia page, and I'll explain it to you in a way where you can understand. Fallacies, and we all know what fallacies are. Basically, fallacies are something that is against a particular rule. And the rules that we've been given here is that if you take 0 and multiply that by 1, you get 0. Okay, the answer is 0. Now, on the other end, if you get 0 and you multiply that by 2, the answer is also 0. All right? So we could say that if that is true, the following is true. You could say 0 multiplies by 1 equals to 0. And on the right side of this formula, wait, I'm sorry, I need to blow this up for you guys. All right, let's attempt this again. All right, so in capitalism, we're giving people the definition that 0 times 0 equals to 1, 0 times 2 equals to 2. So if you kind of match the 2 in the center, I mean, they're both of these equals to 0, therefore they must equal to each other. So you see, this is the logic that we've been given from capitalism, the current mathematics, or today's arithmetic mathematic. There's a fallacy from the universal standpoint. This is true. This is programmed to you within the framework of capitalism, or within the framework of basic arithmetics, okay? So, but 99% of us only learn basic arithmetics. Not many of us excel. But the important thing here is that this should be understood at a very basic level as well, okay? But we could say, even though they both are 0, arriving to them is different. Arriving at 0 is different. So therefore, this is false. This cannot be true. If you could express the meaning that if you take into account arriving to 0 also has a meaning, so therefore no two zeros are the same. If you express that as the argument, the logic, which is true in the universal case, we all could turn 17 years old, but by the time we're 17, it doesn't mean we are all equal, right? I could turn 17 in America from the day I was born to 17 years old, but it's not going to be the same 17-year-old Danny, or Jackson Danny, as the person who was born and raised in Australia, in Africa, in the barrows of the Philippines, in Mexico, in Kazakhstan, in Antarctica, in Alaska. They would not be the same 17-year-old Danny that was brought up and raised in Mississippi or California. You see? So the logic that we've been taught are just based on a lot of assumptions that are carving and programming us into a particular understanding of arithmetics. Okay? And that's why you get to this answer where 1 equals to 0. If you dig down a little bit deeper, which doesn't satisfy the understanding of the logic that we've been given in today's world. Okay? But in a universal, from a universal perspective, anything is possible. Therefore, 1 equals to 0 is possible. What underneath here that arrives to the answer of 1 equals to 0 is the secret that you have not been given, are the patterns that which you have not understood. Therefore, on the surface, where 1 equals to 0 does not make sense to 99% of the population. For those who practice forwards and opposites continually, just like Leonardo da Vinci, Nikola Tesla, Victor Schauberger, those who are connected to the nothingness will fully understand this as part of a sub-existence of this universal logic of mathematics. Okay? But for those who don't understand this, stick with this, because over time it will make sense to you. All right? So that's it, guys. I want that first part to be broken down as simple as that to you guys. The second part, which is the final part, is going to be equally as fascinating. All right? Now, if you were to take calculator, this is a long lesson. I love long lessons because it tells me that most kids today, we're in a society where time is of the essence. So most kids won't even read and watch through this. So I'm happy to build a network of people who are willing, who has the patient, of whom have the patience to go through this process with me. Because once you do, you become smarter, and I know that you understand that when you always connect your past to your future, you're always going to have a stronger future. So at the same time I'm telling you this, always cite the source that which grows and expand your own being, as I tend to do that. Nikola Tesla, Leonardo da Vinci, Walter Russell, Victor Schauberger, people of that sorts that I have inherited their knowledge in order to share that with you today. Okay, so when you pass this information forward, you can either cite myself and allow me to cite all of those legendary Renaissance men in the past, or you could directly cite them and source them. Leonardo da Vinci, Nikola Tesla. There are many more, Itak Bentov, that I haven't described, but these are legendary people who will explain to you the importance of polarity, contrasts, and all of that nature. Even Vincent van Gogh himself, he was one of the math artists that was able to champion contrast, the necessity of contrast. So if you look into his work and dig deep, you'll understand his connection with this thing called the laws of contrast. Okay? All right. So I'm going to take you to the second part. So you know that opposites is very important, okay, in our society. And we were not taught opposites as the fundamental understanding, simply because we weren't taught that in grade school. We weren't told that, hey, before you learn everything, learn that left is right, right is left. When you turn this way, I mean, to someone on your opposite side, that's facing you, he could be facing you from a forward perspective, but someone behind me who's facing me, who's going to see the opposite side of me. What you have to understand is that even though you're facing my forward, you're still facing me. And even though the person behind me is facing my back, he's still facing me. Okay? So opposites come together. They come together. All right? If you do not have opposites, that simply breaks the paradigm of the universe. And can life still exist? Absolutely, life still can exist. Okay? But that's how beautiful life is, because you do not need opposites and understanding of opposites to understand the universe. You could come at the universe from any perspective because of this law called the laws of infinite realities, or anything is possible. Okay? So I'm going to give you the juicy part. I coined this the paradoxical mathematics. Why paradox? Because they're contradicting. Okay? Paradoxical because our universe, apparently 99% of our citizens, those in our capitalistic societies, don't get this, because paradox seems rather far-fetching to them. So, again, I had already explained why. It's because we were programmed to follow a certain logic that is framed within the logic of capitalism, and we reinforce these logics by owning the definitions of the fallacies that comes with the logic. All right? So therefore, it does not make sense for us. But now given that I've proved to you that opposites are necessary and they come together and they elude themselves in a way where you cannot see them on the surface all the time until you practice opposites. That makes sense, right? You wouldn't be able to detect notes of a song, assuming you have been classically trained, or you've been trained in a way where you could detect the infinitesimal sounds within sounds, that you become a connoisseur of sounds, become the expert who's able to tune a guitar or instruments without any other instruments, or without any other special kind of tuning instruments. Alrighty here. Let's go to this. Now, simply put, if I were to teach a kid in school at the very young age, I would start by saying, kids, The minute I express something, I want you to express the opposite of that. Okay? All right, let's start. If I were to say left, my left, you would say right. That closes the gap on opposite. Coincidentally, you're watching me, and I'm assuming my left is your right. So left is right, right is left. So the opposite to left is right. If I were to say up, you'd say down. And in this instance, we share the same orientation. If I were to say hate, you'd say love. Okay, even though that does not, you cannot really exact the two from a screen, through the internet or whatnot. The opposite of that's easy to explain. Hate is love, love is hate. Warm, you could say cool. Hot, the kid could say cold. Crying, the kid could say smiling or laughing. So these are basic opposites, all right? Now, if I were to say sorrows, someone who's 3 years old might not be able to get that, Someone who's older could say joys. If I could say sadness, you could say happiness, right? If I could say straight line, right? If I said straight line, a kid most likely wouldn't be able to understand this. But an adult, someone who practices, could easily say curved lines, all right? Straight and curved lines are two opposite paths, so to speak, okay? So there are easy ones that you can readily identify as opposites, and there are levels, higher levels of opposites that most of you are not able to detect, all right? Continuing on, if I were to say nothing, you could say everything, right? So let's stop there. Nothing. So in mathematics, this is why it's so important. In mathematics, if I were to say, give me a symbol that represents nothing, most people would say 0. Makes sense so far, okay? Now, if I were to ask you for a symbol to represent everything, meaning totality, okay? It represents everything. Now, I know totality carries this crazy Nazi type of connotation. The universe does this because the universe hides all of its secrets in places that are places people tend to avoid, places people that are deterred from, same idea as, finding gold in a mine, finding diamonds in a rough, or a treasure in a haystack. The universe likes to hide those stuff, generally speaking, right? The opposite's also true, but in minuscule fashion, just to uphold this law called the laws of infinite realities, or anything is possible. But generally speaking, the universe hides them in places that appears very ironic, okay? Very ironic that, one man's treasure is another man's trash, so to speak. That's another paradox, okay? So if I asked you for a symbol going back to that, what would your symbol be? Now, the average person who's programmed into the capitalistic arithmetic or lower level arithmetic would simply say infinity, okay? The infinity symbol would typically 99% of the times would be given to me. You see how that works? Because if I were to use a calculator, I want to say 100% of the time, if I were to ask you for a symbol that represents everything, 100 times the calculator would give me the same answer. If I were to divide 5 by 0, 10 by 0, 100 by 0, out of 100 times I would get an answer that says undefined, because you cannot divide anything by 0. So that's how that calculator works, because the calculator has been programmed to give you an answer that says undefined when anything is divided by 0. So that's the logic within the calculator, and it's not hard to associate that to the logic, arithmetic logic that has been programmed into us. Even though it's at a basic level, it's still programmed into us to say that you cannot divide a number by 0. Okay? Now, we still don't have a symbol to represent infinity. And I'll tell you this, an infinity is not a number. Infinity is just an expression of a number that is climbing forever and ever and ever. It's an expression of a number. It's an expression to say that something is climbing infinitely. Okay? It does not represent everything. So you see, in mathematics in itself, and you could say this this pattern repeats itself in every single science within the realm of capitalism. And I've looked into quantum physics, I've looked into rocket scientists, I've looked into metaphysics, which is the physics that I champion. I've also looked into basic physics. I've also looked into psychology, physiology, looked into a lot of different areas that we were not given the full scope as to how the universe really works. We've been programming people to follow capitalistic arithmetic, capitalistic sciences based on the framework that we have provided to people. This framework is not a universal framework. It is only a framework within a framework, much like the same idea that I had told you about the KKK, meaning that the laws of the KKK doesn't necessarily mean it's the laws that governs the laws of the state. The laws of capitalism is also a law that does not govern the laws of the universe. The laws of capitalism and the laws of the KKK, they also fall within the umbrella of the universal sciences or universal truth, that when you understand the universe's algorithm, you'll understand both the algorithms of capitalism, science, and logic that has been programmed into us, and also any other subsets of the laws that were given and taught within capitalism. You see how that works? It's a subset within a subset within a subset. And that's why capitalism's laws and theories and assumptions are always changing. And that's why the books that you read today are no longer valid 3 years from now, because they're selling you new books. We're getting sold new books every 3 years, mainly because of this particular framework, this logic that we've been giving, this forever changing perpetual logic that you've been given. Okay? Now, this hopefully explains to you why a lot of you are going to be frustrated and confusing. All right? We haven't been giving the full scope as to how mathematics work, and I'll also give you a demonstration. If I were to take 5 and let's make that easier. If I were to take the number 10, right? Take the number 10. I divide that by 10. My answer is 1. Easy. If I take, let's go even, answer is 1. If I take 10, divide that by 5. Yep. The answer is 2. Okay, so we could already tell by the pattern of looking at this, okay? 10 divided by 2. My answer is 5, okay? So based on this 3, we don't have to go any further. You could easily say that as a number, let's give that x, is divided by, let's give this number y, right, equals z. Okay, so if I take x as 10 and divide it by a number that is constantly decreasing, you could say infinitely decreasing. This gives me a number that is infinitely increasing. Right? That's simple enough to say, right? Because if I use the number, the next one on this list is if I take this number 10 divided by 1, which is decreasing, and I'll get the answer is 10. My answer would be 10, which is increasing. So here, this logic is true, okay? So 10 divided by 1 gives me 10. You see the pattern here. As this number, y, decreases, this number z, or the letter I should say, as y decreases, z increases. That sort of makes sense, right? Because over here, you could say that because it's the inverse relationship. 2 inverse makes an ordinary, right? It cancels itself out. So in a sense, as this increases, this number ultimately together, x divided by y, as this y decreases, x divided by y increases, okay? Because it's an inverse relationship. Okay, so it's basically like saying 2 negatives make a positive. If you make a negative number and you multiply by another negative number, you get a positive number. The same is true. Okay, now let's go further down. So if I take the number 10, oh wait, I want to connect this back to this logic over here. Okay, right, this logic that we see right behind is the fallacy. If 0 times 1 equals to 0 and 0 times 2 equals to 0, the following is true. 0 times 1 equals to 0 times 2. This here, from a universal perspective, is saying that this is just a subset. This is just, you can program this this logic any way you want. Much like saying the universe doesn't work like this. This is just a subset of the universe. The universe also includes this, but it's not limited to this. Okay? So I could program into a program into a calculator to express this assumption, but it doesn't mean that that calculator is correct. You see what I'm saying? The same idea is true. See, I could program into here, say that this side represents increasing. This side represents decreasing. Or, I'm sorry, let's just say this side represents decreasing. This side represents increasing. See, that in itself is not true. You see? That in itself, I could frame a logic in the sense where, well, one side's decreasing, the other side must be decreasing. You know, because they equal to each other. So that isn't true if you put a 10 in front of it, or an inverse associated with an inverse component of the formula. Okay? So this isn't true because we know we have x divided by a decreasing number equals to increasing number. Okay? So on the surface, you could teach a kid going, well, if one side's decreasing, the other side must be increasing. You know? If a kid doesn't know this inverse relationship and how it works, you know, you can build this argument into them. Even though this is a weak argument, it's still an argument because a kid can only recognize decreasing on one side and increasing on the other, and automatically it throws them into a world of hurt from their logical framework, because a kid's a 3-year-old child or a 5-year-old child simply will not understand this unless genetically their parents were heavy mathematicians and they were programmed heavily into a mathematical framework where this is easily discernible and calculated by them. Okay? So in a world where 10, let's go back into this pattern, okay? In a world where we divide 10 by a number that's continued to increase, 0.5, the answer over here is 20, right? Continues to grow, 10 divided by 0.1. Your answer is 100. You see that, guys? You see this pattern so far? So if I take this number over here, right, and it constantly goes down, I am certain to find out that this number is constantly going up. See, it follows this path. Okay? That as this number or letter y continues to decrease, z over increases. All right? Now, if I were to take 0, divide that by 0.00001, I'd get, let's just go, this number would be higher. Let's just pretend that this is close enough, all right? But, you know, for those that are very mathematically inclined and you want an actual answer, you get the answer. Here, I divide 10 by 0.0, so I could see in this particular formula, there's only 1 0 here, okay? Or I could put 0.1. So if I take the number 10 divided by 0.1, I have 100. So I could automatically clearly see that the pattern is 1 and 2 zeros. So 1, 2 zeros. So if I add up all of these zeros, including here 0.0060 zeros and a 1, I could add all of this together and I could say 6 zeros plus 2 equals to 8 zeros. And on this right side, I can automatically see that I am short 1 0. Okay. Now here I have a total of 8 0 with the commas indicating and make it easier for me to add 3 3 2 equals to 8 zeros. I could clearly see that no matter how far, I could just say it here, 1 billion zeros equals to, I could take 10 divided by 0.10 billion zeros and 1, because you have to have a number there, otherwise it'll just be 0, right? Then the answer would be 1, here's 1 billion zeros plus 2 zeros. Which are the 2 zeros that we add 2 in front here? Because they're always going to add the 2 zeros if you're using 10 in a decimal. So you take these 2, you add it to the 1 billion. Now you have 1 billion and 2 zeros. Okay? The answer to that would be 10 divided by 1. Yeah, let's just leave it at that. Okay, so now we know that the answer over here is 1 plus, oh yeah, we already got the answers there. What am I saying? So you already got the answer right here. The answer simply is 1 with 1 billion and 2 zeros. And that would be, I don't know what that number would be, but that would be an extremely high number. You see what I'm saying? That would be 1, 10 to the, let's give a hat to this guy. I believe it's up there. To the 1 billion and 0 zeros. You know, it's crazy. Two. So you're constantly multiplying it, adding it. So I'm not at this level of arithmetic and mathematics, but you guys could, I'm pretty sure you guys could simplify this and you'll figure it out. But I'm not far off from there, okay? So my point in telling you this is that as I take 10, I divide it by a number that is approaching 0, right? I'm getting a number on the right side that is approaching this thing that I call everything. Okay? If I take 10 and divide that by 0, which is nothing, the answer should be everything. Because for us to simply say that it's undefined, you completely discount all of the necessity. You completely negated the importance of decimal points, which is extremely important to teach people quantum physics, because quantum physics goes into the deeper levels of the infinitesimal area, the corpuscular area, the finite area, the small, the nooks and crannies that are inobservable to the eyes, but are still mathematically sound, still logically true from a universal standpoint. You are negating the importance of 0. in this particular formula, you are negating the importance of the symbol called everything, or we could also call that totality. Remember, totality carries a bad and negative connotation simply because of the cycle is how the universe works. And the cycle is simply you come into an understanding, then you lose that understanding. Then you come into that understanding, and then you lose that understanding. And that happens to the individual, and that also happens collectively as a society. Okay? So 10 divided by 0 equals to everything. And we simply do not have a formula or a symbol in mathematics to represent everything. Okay? We do not have that. Okay? So instead, here, now I'll explain to you. I'm not going to go into why instead we are given what. Why the universe is giving you this, and I kid you not, only 1 out of 1,000 of you will understand this. And if you are one in those 1,000, or you prove to me that this is no longer the effect that we are in a society of people just completely living as a programming of capitalism, then that's fine. I'm completely okay with that. I'm not here to necessarily forcing anyone to transcend or to reach a point of ultimate enlightenment. That's not the idea. I want you to enjoy the journey to eventually get to the point where you have attained universal enlightenment, which could take forever, which could never happen. For some of us, it could just take a split second. Okay? So by not having this from a universal perspective, teaching people 10 or any number divided by 0 equals to undefined, from a universal perspective, this is called a fallacy. Because no two fallacies are the same. Just like there are no 2 zeros back here are the same, because arriving at zeros are different, We'll call this a universal fallacy, simply because what we've been taught is a programming of capitalism, okay? It's not a fallacy to capitalism to say that x divided by 0 equals undefined, because it's programmed. That's how they work. That's how they want to teach their followers. That's how they want to teach their students. Their constituents, etc., and etc. But for you guys understand that I'm all about duality, polarity, that they come together, truth and lies come together, fractality, the whole is the part's the whole. I want you both to get an understanding that these two arguments here are both true from the perspective of one is from the perspective of capitalism, and the other is the perspective of the universe. And that's why they say that when you go slow, you'll get there faster. Your sorrows or your joys unmask. The mightiest sword requires the slightest touch. The rich man came from nothing, So the opposites come together. It's just you live in a phase where the average mind divides the two, and to the average mind that they are not seen as one and the same. And that's how beautiful our universe is, that the contradiction of the two is of itself a reality, and it's a working reality. Okay? All right, guys, I hope today's lesson is easy for you to understand. Any of this stuff I could break down even further to simpler terms for you to understand. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask away. That's it for the day. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your week. Happy Monday. Take care.